Welcome to the Will to Power podcast. I'm going to get through the introduction quick. Let's get into it. So, recently there's been a lot of controversy around the Patriot Front rally, supposed rally that occurred. So, a lot of people have been calling them feds, and I wanted to use that as a kind of jump off point and also talk about the Patriot Front. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to divide this into three parts. The first part is just going to be about kind of activism, in real life activism. And the first thing I want you to know, and this is very important, is there's two types of very dangerous people you're going to run into doing in real life activism. Those two types of people are, well, three types. I'll get into the third type in a moment. But the two very dangerous types of people you're going to run into are feds and idiots. Now, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the two, quite honestly, because they will propose the most ridiculously adventurous bullshit. You know, the kind of shit that feds would try to entrap you into. Now, idiots will try to do the same thing, and it's hard to tell the difference. So, you know, it's almost pointless in speculating whether or not somebody is or isn't, in a particular instance, a fed. It's almost better to denote a sort of behavior that could be described as fed behavior, pig behavior, if you will. So, what to do? And like I'm saying, you're going to encounter this if you're doing in real life activism. You're going to encounter people who are proposing that you do things that are illegal. And this can occur in two main ways, too. It will occur either, things that are obvious, oh, let's go set something on fire, let's go to destroy something, let's go do something illegal that will catch a charge really fucking easily. And sorry, it's very fucking cold where I'm at right now. Or they will try to entangle you in some sort of financial scheme, essentially, where some sort of illegal, oh, we're funding the movement bullshit. Now, again, hard to tell the difference. And that comes in where the third type of person you're going to run into, and that was a power-tripping fool. Now, the power-tripping fool is somebody who has a little bit of clout within that scene, but, it's bullshit, right? And they'll necessarily use that clout to their own kind of egotistical ends. And they'll kind of bring other people down with them. But in any case, so what you need to do when you encounter these people, it's very fucking simple. It's common sense, really. So the first time they say something stupid, you say, okay, I'm not really into that, change the subject. Second time, you say, hey man, I'm really not into that. Like, I'd prefer we don't talk about that ever again. If they ever bring it up again, you cut them off completely. You never talk, maybe you text them, maybe you talk to them one more time and say, hey man, I'm really sorry, I think we're into different things, I can't talk to you anymore, please don't contact me. And then you cut contact. Very fucking simple. Now, how you want, if this is like in a social situation, how you want to approach that, like if you want to tell other people about the situation, that's on you. But this is a very simple heuristic way to cut out the people who are pigs and idiots. And of course, the power-tripping fools, you just need to extricate yourself from that scene. Now, another important aspect of this is, since we've already indicated that this is more of a sort of behavior and not like, oh, this guy is actually a cop, like, working with this, this ABC organization. It's pig behavior. So you had to have rules against pig behavior. So no pig talk, right? There's no talk about guns, no talk about violence, no talk about, whatever, any of that. No pig questions, right? You're not asking weird fucking questions trying to get personal information about people. Again, these have to be rules. When this happens, hey, no pig questions. That's a pig question, don't ask it. Very simple. This is a very, very, very simple thing. That's basic OpSec. So so when we're talking about like feds, again, Like, we need to be talking about, like, actual behavior, not just, oh, we saw this thing on the internet, it looks strange, it's probably the feds. Again, super simple, and next we're going to talk a little bit more about the Patriot Front and what I think about them. So, a lot of people have said the Patriot Front are feds because they don't look like fucking derpy right-wing people on the internet, essentially. And I want to raise that right front and center. That a lot of the people that are like, oh, these guys are feds, well, they look disciplined. It's just so fucking retarded, right? So that's offhand. I'm not even going to really talk about that too much anymore, other than to like talk about how cringy that is on the part of the people who raise that, line of thing. It did, I'm going to say that it did look different, right? And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But instead I want to talk about the Patriot Front itself. I want to talk a little bit about its politics. And it has this kind of tradcon white nationalism. And I've gone over this before, and I'm going to go over it again. This is a dead fucking end. White nationalism, this kind of like hearkening back to whatever past of America, is not going to go anywhere. It's not really possible to unite non-white people under this rhetoric and political tilt. You don't get to pick the actual social terrain. You have the social terrain, you need to use it, right? Why would you pursue a politics? This is just so fucking retarded. Why would you pursue a politics that automatically prohibits 30 to 40% of people in, very important areas, to some extent, from uniting with you? It just doesn't make any sense. And the response you'll get will, eventually whites will get alienated. Okay, so you're really counting on this hypothetical situation where, the 70% of whites, dwindling, like slowly declining number of whites, is going to wake up, whatever, and jump on board with your small band of internet racists. It just doesn't fucking add up, right? Like, it's just not coherent. So in that regard, white nationalism is just, pragmatically a dead end. It's a cul-de-sac. But more importantly, on a philosophical level, it's also fucked, right? Because it kind of takes this Western, whatever, America, again, whatever, this is what we identify with, when this shit is fucking cringy, quite honestly. Homer would fucking cringe at this bullshit, because people like Homer, right? People like Homer distinguished between the Apollonian and the Dionysian, right? They distinguished between the virtue of what made greatness, not just, we're, of course they were pretty ethnocentric, but it wasn't just, we're white. We have this, kind of broad racial distinction. So again, it goes back into, what are you really promoting? Is this kind of cul-de-sac identity politics, reactive, I should say, identity politics? It's not going to be get you anywhere practically, but also doesn't really identify that it makes societies great. Instead, it just identifies the past form of a great society. So again, white nationalism, I'm not a huge fan of it. But I want to take it back to the notion of feds, right? Because there are other ways that feds work, and there are other ways that nefarious elements work, and that's wrecking, right? Feds will come in, they'll push people into dead ends. I think a lot of the whole online 4chan anti-Semitism is probably drummed up by you know who. I mean, because in a lot of ways it is a fucking dead end. And this the same way, creating negative PR, right? That's the other big thing. The other thing that wreckers will do is they'll come in and they'll propose you do stupid fucking shit that makes you look retarded to the normies. And I'm gonna go into that in a little bit in part 3. But finally, I just want to talk about what I think about Popular Front, or Patriot Front. My intuition tells me that they're not a glow-op, right? I think they are genuine. They look like they're, maybe ex-military, ex-police, maybe current military. And in a lot of ways, this is the worst feasible nightmare. The thing that, if the globo-homo elites, the fake gay elites, were to think about the worst possible scenario for them, that's it, right? It's like ex-military people forming militias. People who actually know how to use guns, getting an idea. So this is, in a lot of ways, is the worst feasible nightmare for the establishment. So rightly, the establishment's going to attack it without trying to bring too much attention on it. Unless, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it is a glow-up. But so my intuition tells me it's not a glow-up, it's just, former military guys with an idea. But, if you can find their website, if you go to DuckDuckGo instead of Google to find their website, my initial impression is that it's cringy, right? It has this kind of self-seriousness and its appeal to tradition that it just comes off as fucking cringy, right? That's me coming from my political background, my experience in life. Maybe that's not as serious of a political critique. But I would finally say that, all traditions, cultures, and unity are forged by states, right? Forged by power. The nobility is the holder of culture in a lot of ways, except in deformed, dying empires like the United States. So we need to keep that in mind, right? We can't just, we're going back or we're holding on to the present, because things always change. And when you don't participate, when you don't even fight over the direction of that change, when you're like, oh no, I don't want change to happen, well, you don't really have that much of an influence in the way that change goes. And that cuts to a lot of my philosophical disagreement with a lot of conservatism and tradconism right there. So they need to be making an appeal to kind of new tradition. Making an appeal to culture and a kind of unity, a plausible unity, kind of new traditions that actually do embody those virtues that make societies great. So finally, I want to talk about what I think, beyond that Patriot Front gets right and what they get wrong. The first thing they get right that a lot of the right wing gets terribly wrong, especially, the online right wing, the people who think they're right wing, is that they understand, the Patriot Front intuitively understands the concept of the Leninist vanguard. And that is to say, they understand that you need a leading force. You need the people in the front who are kind of directing the broader movement. And this is what probably the Patriot Front wants to be. And this is, this is ironically why a lot of the online right thinks they're feds, right? Because the Patriot Front is serious, right? This is a group that is serious. This is not people posting memes. This is not fucking 24-year-old incels who can't get laid in the most promiscuous society in the world somehow. who who don't understand the concept of being serious politically. And again, like I just mentioned, it is kind of cringy on one hand because it is so self-serious, but on the other hand, the Patriot Front understands that you need a serious organization. You need people actually dedicated to the cause who are willing to put in the work and who are, on the other hand, actually virtuous, right? Actually embody those qualities that you need. Whereas the online right doesn't understand that. It begs the question, right? I'll put it this way. It begs the question. If you are fat and out of shape, and if you can't even fuck a 4, right? Are you really right-wing? Are you? Honestly, can you call yourself right-wing? At that point, if you're like a NEET, right? Or if you're just a failure of a person, what business do you have being part of the right wing? So your reality is so distinct from theirs, obviously. These are guys that work out. They look clean cut. Even if they are feds, at least they have a job. So who am I to trust when it comes to what is right-wing politics here? But in any case, so the Patriot Front understands this concept of the Leninist vanguard party, at least on an intuitive level. That notion that you need people who are serious, people who are professional to an extent, at the skills you need to, build a movement. But what they get wrong, and this is an important thing, is they get a couple things wrong. I'll talk about the more recent example, or I'll talk about Mao first, right? Mao, I'm not going to talk too much about Mao, but I do want to just note that in the first sentence of his collected works, right? The essay is entitled Class Analysis of Chinese Society. The quote is, "Who are our friends, who are our enemies?" And that's an important question, right? You have to be able to understand the political terrain. And I would even expand it a little bit further. You know who you are, to some extent. Know yourself, know your enemy. But also you want to know who are the middle forces. So you have this conception where you have the enemies who you want to isolate and overcome. You want to nudge them out of power. You either want to seize the institutions of power, or you want to build new institutions of power. You guys say you want to have the ability to influence others and to direct scarce resources. You want to take that ability away from them. That is how you want to act towards the enemy, at least strategically. So you have this enemy that you're fighting, you have yourself, but then you also have this broad array of middle forces. These people who are winnable, but maybe not necessarily. They're not necessarily going to come over your side just because you exist, just because you tell them to. So that's the first thing. The Patriot Front really needs to get a grasp of that because, again, there's this broad swath of people that they're going to alienate. Unnecessarily so, while not necessarily getting brownie points from the whitoids. It's not like it's Jesus. And I can understand maybe these guys are from like rural Nebraska or something, in that sort of environment, yeah, it makes more sense. Or, even I guess Lithuania, right? Lithuanian nationalism makes sense in Lithuania. Maybe you don't want Sudanese refugees coming over right now. But even in a place like Omaha, you got plenty of black people, plenty of Mexicans, and they're not going anywhere. You know, so again, you gotta think of ways that you can win these people over while isolating the actual enemies, which is, whether you want to call them, or, just the global homo elite, the Western fake gay elite. How do you isolate them while winning over those middle forces? So that's the first big thing that the Patriot Front at least isn't conceiving in the correct way. The second thing that they don't is Gramsci's notion of the state. And again, I reference a lot of successful Marxist revolutionaries to, kind of posit right-wing strategies for the right. Because I'm like, well, let's look at what's been successful, right? That's kind of how I got out of left-wing politics in a lot of ways. Because I'm like, well, what actually makes things successful? And I started researching business. Well, businesses, they have to, they have to succeed or die. But then I got into right-wing politics. I'm looking at the left wing actually kind of rising up in the United States and the West. I'm like, well, maybe these kind of strategies that they've been pursuing do have some merit, right? And one of these is not Gramsci's notion of the state. So what is the state? It's kind of all those elements of influence and power. It's not just the government, it's also the media, it's also the schools, it's also, at this point, the church. It's always been the church, but now the church is, on the global homo side, to say the least. Who knows what side the church is on. In any case, so this notion that you have the state, and you have to be able to fight the state while either taking it over or building parallel institutions. And Gramsci was more about the slow takeover, right? That's the cultural Marxism. It was, how do you insert yourself, insinuate yourself into positions of authority and slowly change the culture? And it's an interesting question to ponder. I'm not going to get into it too much right now because, one, I'm cold as fuck. And secondly, I just wanted to present these ideas in the basic so that people could, kind of consider them, right? Especially with Gramsci, I think it's a very interesting notion because, and it's much the reality, right? Because it's, at this point, we're not just up against, the Hillary Clinton-ite State Department, the Kamala Harris neoliberal, I don't know what you call it at this point, the neoliberal, Asiatic fiefdom. But it's not just, the point I'm trying to make is it's just not the government, right? It's just not the state we're up against. It's also the media, the people who run the schools, the people who run everything that's important, right? So how do you, and again, it's not just the Jews, it's not just, it's a lot of fucking white people, and it's a lot of black people who have power too. Don't buy into the fucking CRT myth that, it's this vast gulf between black and white people, or, people of color, BIPOC, whatever. There's a lot of people, Hispanics, quote unquote, black people who do have a lot of authority. But in any case, but not just authority in the state, right? Authority in media, authority in education. So how do we challenge that? Is it best to build entirely alternative institutions? Or is it best to kind of operate under the radar a little bit longer term and try to work your way into those institutions? I would argue probably both. And I'm going to leave it on that. I think, like I said, I don't think the Patriot Front is necessarily a glow-up. Maybe I'm wrong. They seem pretty genuine. I think the reasoning of the online right is super fucking cringy, especially the 4chan right that's like, I'm going to post fucking Nazi memes and LARP like a fucking Nazi, and then I'm going to fucking think this was, it's just, I don't know. It's just out of this world. But again, if you are going to do this sort of, if you are going to enter into this world, especially in real life activism, you are going to encounter those feds or idiots Again, hard to tell them apart sometimes in all situations. But, there's heuristics, there's actionable, practical heuristics that you can take. Again, just cut them off. Very fucking simple. Don't allow the behavior. I mean, it's quite obvious. And from what I understand, the Patriot Front does this internally, right? They don't tolerate the gun talk. But again, I don't think white nationalism in this form, this kind of trad-cron, white nationalism is going to go anywhere. I think it's a cul-de-sac. It also misses that distinction between, the greatness Apollonian values, virtues, versus, whatever, the peasants, the slave morality. And yeah, I like I said, I don't think they're a glow up. Could be wrong. It is what it is. I think they get some things right. I like that they are starting to take things seriously, and I think that is what's going to scare, to some extent, the global homo establishment. But, they need to think a little bit more about strategy, a little bit more about the actual social forces, the social terrain in a place like the United States, outside of the county in Nebraska, to get a better grip. So I'm going to leave it on that, and I know I talk a little shit, but ultimately I do like them, right? As long as they're genuine. I think that, I think it's good. I think that the more kind of resistance, the better. Obviously, I'm not going to endorse them, but it's, it's interesting times we live in, to say the least. And I think people should be smart, and that's kind of what I want to leave this with, is I want people to be a little bit more nuanced, have a little bit wider understanding, but also operate according to practical heuristics. And with that note, I will catch you later. Peace.